Hello, everybody.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning, folks.
How's Wednesday looking here as the summer draws to a
Hello.
close? Let's see.
Hello.
Good morning. Welcome. Let's give folks a minute to join here. I don't see Ashley yet. Interesting. Oh, now there she is.
She is.
Good morning.
Good morning, Ashley. I don't see Ashley yet. Then you appeared right on cue.
I think we're gonna have a big group today.
It looks like it. I'm watching all the squares pop up. Time you get to 4 in a row, that tells you we got a bigger group. So. All right, wait one more moment here. Cool. All right, well, why don't we go ahead and jump in? Let's see, we've got, sorry, make sure we have the Everest guys are there. Yep, great, okay. Yeah, why don't we go ahead and jump in? Thanks everybody for joining. We are here for the August 25th edition of the Confidential Computing Consortium Outreach Committee. Let me share my screen. We'll start going through the presentation. Are you guys seeing that?
Yes.
All right. We operate under the antitrust policy. Be familiar with that as we start our meeting today. As a reminder, we are a community focused on open source license projects and securing data in use and accelerating adoption of confidential computing through open collaboration. Every member is welcome. Every project meeting our tier is welcome. We operate as a transparent collaborative community, and members, contributors, and leaders pledge to make this experience harassment free for everyone. Our agenda for the day is fairly straightforward. We've got one set of minutes to approve and one action item to look at from past meetings. And then we'll quickly touch on that webinar topics, but the bulk of the conversation, which I think what most of you are here for, is the discussion of the market research report feedback that Everest had shared with us, and making sure we've got one in there. Nick, I did see a request around the fellowship program, so we'll talk for a few minutes before the meeting ends as well around what you're thinking for that and what that might look like. And then we'll have a very quick check-in on what people are thinking around the Open Source Summit coming up here in a couple of weeks. And was there anything else that was urgent that needed to get addressed in today's meeting that we should add to the agenda for the discussion? All right, hearing none. Do we have a quorum, Ashley, among all of us? I don't think we do.
Not yet. I'll keep an eye on it.
We'll come back to that. All right. The one action item from our July meeting was starting the process on a press release when the Everest study is released, and Ashley has started that process. So it's underway. In progress. So making good progress there. Thank you for that. There were no other open items coming out of our previous meeting. Let's check in quickly. We, as previously discussed, no webinars for July and August. We currently have scheduled the attestation discussion for September. So that is flexible on the timing of that. As we come out of the summer, are there any other topics that have come onto people's radar screens that we should be thinking of as potential topics or getting scheduled as potential topics for upcoming webinars? Okay.
We brought this up in the last TAC meeting, which I think is almost a month ago at this point, and we had a pretty good discussion around encouraging folks to start brainstorming. And one thing that came up is that during C2DS, we had the stickies.io, that collaborative board. So for anybody that wants to check out that board, it is still live, and that has a lot of great ideas that were sourced on the day of C2DS. So there could be some interesting topics for webinars in that board if people want to take a look at that again.
Okay.
And I'll link that in
yeah.
the minutes for those that want the link.
Okay. In the meantime, Ashley, why don't we go ahead and confirm then with Dave Fowler that he's on for September.
Okay, I'll find a date for him.
Okay. And we can go ahead and move forward with that. Okay, good. All right, let's talk about Everest. Everest team, thank you for sharing your work in progress with us. Great to see that. Great to see the documents coming together. I know there, as you said, there's still some kind of formatting work happening, but thought this would be a good conversation, good opportunity to have conversation about any feedback people have from the review of the documents. Whatever said, was there anything you wanted to add as kind of commentary or context or anything else you want to show us before we jump into some conversation and feedback?
David. So no, I think we have been going through the feedback that we have received on email. I think largely 70% of it is more tactical in nature in terms of inclusion or exclusion of certain logos and stuff like that. And there are certain which may require a detailed answer that we are working on. But I think largely whatever we have received so far, we are good with it. In case there is any additional feedback, we'll be happy to hear on this call. Yeah, I think, and overall, I think the report is on track in terms of the overall formatting and the final report. We expect to send it out to you guys by first week of September.
Okay.
So I think, and that's on track. So yeah, as soon as we finish this loop of feedback, I think we will be good to go.
Hey, can we clarify when we say that you've received feedback and are okay with it? Have we, the outreach committee, rolled up all of the emailed feedback? Is that what we're talking about? I'm not sure which feedback has been received.
Yes, Abhishek, that's what I'm asking you. So has there been anything kind of controversial? Because a lot of the feedback is going directly to you guys, which is great. That's more efficient. But is there anything that's been controversial or people are just having disagreements about?
Well, wait, no, that's not my question. My question is, did the feedback that we have provided through the outreach committee get supplied to Everest?
Yeah, so we have been receiving the feedback through Ashley. So I think so far we have got feedback from, I think, 3 or 4 players. Correct me if I'm wrong, Ashley.
Yeah, we've gotten feedback, I think, from the Centric, R3, HD Systems, and Intel. Off the top of my head. Yeah.
And then Jess, I know you sent some yesterday, I think.
Yeah,
Right,
I think
and
it'd be good to go over feedback like Jesse's, and we have some too. And I saw something from Felix today because I didn't put my thing through email. I wanted to discuss it.
Okay.
So I think there's probably feedback that Everest hasn't gotten yet.
Great. So that, I think, part of the purpose of this session is to add any of that feedback that hasn't been provided yet and talk it through, which we can certainly do today, and then kind of go from there. So, is from the feedback you've seen so far, Abhishek, is there anything that's kind of anything that's conflicting, or does it seem pretty consistent?
I think today evening before this call, we received the feedback from Intel. I think one of the points that has been mentioned is around the market share of APAC, and I think it's. So what I got from the mail is that the present market share looks like low, given the present share of China in the APAC region and in the world market is almost equivalent to UK, is what I got from the mail. So I think that's the only one that I think is the so-called controversial one so far.
Okay.
Maybe
Well, I think my point of my question is I was surprised to see how low APAC was, especially considering it presumably includes PRC. And I guess my question was, is it low because that is your informed assessment, or is it low because you didn't get any responses from the PRC folks? Because what I'm hearing from PRC is that it's higher, but if they didn't provide you any of that info, then I could understand why you would have a lower number.
So I think from a region standpoint, I think from a supply side, we have talked to a couple of folks. I think Ant Group and Alibaba Group being couple of them, and then there were a couple of names from the demand side. Some of the banking organizations of the region as well. So what?
Okay, so
we
you feel
could
like you
get-
have pretty good coverage?
Yeah, I think it would be fair enough coverage, I would say. And what I could gather from the feedback that we've received on these calls is that so in I think in both of these cases, folks on the call, again, given the nascency of the market, people don't have that level of visibility in terms of how big or how small is that region in the overall perspective. But then I think in not going region specific, but in general, like what we often ended up hearing is that how would this geography or industry split look like, let's say 3 years or 5 years down the line? It would typically, replicate the cloud software and services market in to a certain extent. And then there are there are some regional specific nuances in terms of certain regions being the first to adopt confidential computing over the others, and factoring in those things, we arrive at the final geography splits.
Yeah,
Again,
well,
if we
I guess
have-
so. I think, but I think there's a math problem. I'm looking at slide 13, which shows.
Why don't we bring it up so we can all look at it?
Should we have it open? Can project it?
I guess I can.
Yeah, just give me
Or Susil. Okay, good. So I'm looking at that slide, and that shows the breakout of the TAM. What's confusing to me is I feel like we're mixing apples and oranges. So the UK, I think, is the easiest illustration. The UK may have a high percentage of its solutions going to confidential
slide
computing.
13, right? Slide 13.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
That's the
So this shows the UK, right, starting 9 to 11, going to 11 to 13. As a percentage of the UK TAM, I believe what this is saying is 13% of the UK TAM would be confidential computing. Because there's no way that the UK is going to account for 13% of the world's confidential computing. It's one little tiny country. How is it going to account for 13% of the world's confidential computing? That doesn't make any sense, right? China's systems eclipse UK 100 to 1. So I'm not sure, because this is showing a stack that adds up to 100%. So this should be 100% of the world. I don't think the UK accounts for 13% of the world's systems.
So yeah, so just to add a little perspective over here is that if we see, while UK is a small country, but then let me just talk about the IT services market to start off with, right? Overall IT services market, I think UK commands over 15% of the overall global IT services market. And then we get into, if further, if we get into some of the specific areas such as data and analytics or cloud services, right? Again, the percentage is split is so UK as a percentage of the global services market or the global software market, it is in that ballpark of 10 to 15%. And again, to your point, the way to read this particular chart is also in a similar fashion, that out of the overall total addressable market, the 100%, this is how it splits across these regions.
Well, I'm happy to hear other people's input, but I just fundamentally disagree with that. I can't imagine where you're getting that.
So what would be useful is if you had a bar here that showed us how the world's IT market breaks up, and then how these numbers relate to that, because I'm with Jesse. I don't know where that percent comes from. And maybe there's a graph,
definitely.
whether it's, but, so in other words, we're saying at the end, 2026, roughly 42% of these market will be North America. But what share of the world's IT market will North America have in 2026? Is that representative of the share? And I think he's right that APAC just looks awfully small considering China.
Okay. So maybe, what we can provide a perspective on is how does this compare vis-a-vis the global cloud software market? And then to your earlier point, how does this contrast to the global IT services market? So I think.
But yeah, and I hear you. I hear you saying the services market, I think is what you're calling it.
Both software and services from a cloud perspective.
Okay, software and services. And so I recognize I'm coming from a manufacturer, so I'm more familiar with the hardware perspective, but I still don't see. I'm just using UK. I only use UK because to me it's the most egregious example that proves the point. But I don't see how you can say 15% of the world's computing is centered in the UK. I mean, name a company. I don't get it. It's a small country. I don't get it. And so if UK is wrong, and China is wrong, then what else is wrong? Right.
So the other thing is you have UK as being like half of the entire continental Europe, which doesn't
make sense. In confidential computing, we've seen, for instance, way more activity in Germany than we have in the UK. And that's just one example. Also, I know there's a lot of IT in France. I guess I just don't see how it feels like maybe we have a biased we've gotten a lot of detail from a few and not much detail from the many. If these are the numbers we're seeing.
So can you explain to us, Abhishek, what was the source for these things? Was this based on interviews? Where did these numbers come from?
Yeah, I'm not sure. So, as I pointed out earlier, right? So the way we started off with is to get a sense out of how would some of these, market split numbers look like from an industry and geo perspective over a period of 3 year and a 5 year sort of a time frame, right? And a common feedback that we gathered from most of our, sources, primary sources, is that essentially this confidential computing market would also replicate the what the global cloud software and services market today is in many sense. There will be certain.
Yeah, I'm sorry, but I understand that, but you're not answering the question, which is what were those primary sources? Were they people within the consortium that you talked to? Were they, did you look at, I don't know, some kind of third party objective look at the entire world in terms of IT? So I think what we're trying to get at is where did these numbers come from? I understand the process of how you tried to extrapolate, but where did the original idea for these numbers come from?
Yeah, so this is a combination of the participation from the consortium as well as the reach outs that we have made. I think we have discussed in last few meetings that who all we have been talking to from at least from a supply side. So the likes of Alibaba and AWS, to name a few from a cloud perspective. And then from a demand side, from an enterprise perspective, talking to some of the banking organizations who have adopted confidential computing to a certain extent, and getting a sense out of them in terms of their demand priorities and their spend priorities from a confidential computing perspective. So
So this
it's a
includes data
combination
from
of
Alibaba and includes AWS and Baidu and some of those other Asian cloud providers?
yes.
Okay.
So what was, so, yeah, I understand the methodology, but, what, walk us through the logic for why these numbers are right.
Yeah, and by the way, I think to me, based on your feedback, I don't think I'm questioning where you've got confidential computing
Yeah.
positioned. I'm questioning your source on the overall market. That's the part that I'm questioning, right? I think you've got the right percentage of the UK. I think you've got the wrong size of the UK. That's my point. What is your source for the overall computing market, not the confidential computing market?
Maybe so here I'm reading this wrong. So I think this is I think we're saying here, to your point, Jesse, that currently 9% to 11% of the confidential computing market today is out of the UK. And that in 2026, of the total spend on confidential computing, 11 to 13% that will be coming out of the UK. Right?
Not from a spend, but a TAM perspective. Yeah, total addressable market perspective.
Okay.
But the way I think what Abhishek was saying is the way to get to that number is by taking the likely percentage of confidential computing and applying it to the overall size of the software and services market in the UK. My concern is the overall size of that software and services market in the UK is maybe not correct. I'm wondering what's the source of that. Certainly not us.
Okay. Yeah, the upstream numbers wrong. Okay.
So I just did Google on the size of the IT market worldwide. This is Statistica or whatever. It says 4.2 trillion US dollars in 2021. Okay, I don't know where that's right. But let's just start with that. If the UK is 10% of that roughly, then that means there's $400 billion of IT spend in the UK. Does that sound like a reasonable number? I mean, that's what we're sort of getting at.
Yeah, it sounds like 10x what's reasonable.
So just to add, right, and to your question, David, around how we arrived at a global IT services or a global software or a cloud software and services market, right? I think as a follow-up to this call, I can provide you all the estimates that we have. So given Everest Group, we have been tracking the cloud software and services market for many years now. We have been publishing some of these numbers in across our reports. And the primary source of these data is, again, talking to the supply side, both on the software and the services side, getting an estimate of their share of revenue from these regions. So think about the top 20 GSIs who are participating across our assessment, cloud services assessment, and even cloud security services assessments. Also, from a software vendor side, the likes of AWS, GCP and Azure that we often engage with on multiple assessments. So I think both of these point out to sort of this percentage split. I can provide some of those market split numbers from a software and from a services perspective.
Yeah, that might be helpful.
And even like to just put some things in perspective, if I have some of the estimates from a vendor perspective, I know the cloud vendors mostly don't disclose region-wise split, but in case I have some of the proxy from a software vendor perspective, I'll share some of those numbers, if not from a cloud vendor, just from any other software vendor, right? UKI is a big market. I think it's difficult to understand, but yeah, it is. There are a lot of banking organizations who are spending a lot into IT, and and while the rest of the continental Europe is a big region compared to the UKI, but it is a far less mature region in terms of the consumption of IT or consumption of digital technologies and related transformation activities. Yeah, I think so. Those are some of the reasons I would say, and I can provide you some of the estimates on email if that helps.
Well, it's interesting to me that you say that, because I mean, we're selling a crap ton of servers into PRC, so it's weird that they're not running any services on them. The PRC is 100 times as big as the UK market, and so what are they doing with all that stuff if they're not running IT services on it? It doesn't make sense.
So
look forward to seeing some of that source data, but I kind of want to.
Yeah, and definitely, I think we can further brainstorm on it and arrive at a final number that seems to be more representative of the market. We will share our estimates in terms of how we have arrived at these, and if you believe that there are certain estimates that you have or certain primary input points that you have across UKI and China region, so maybe we'll factor in those and revise some of these numbers. I mean, we are open to do that.
Okay.
Jesse, you had some other, so it sounds like we should take a close look at those numbers. Jesse, you had some other comments as well, though, in your message. Are there some other things we want to, while you're going through, you want to go through some of the other ones?
Well, could we spend a minute on the high tech industry? I saw it referred to in there as sort of a standalone, and in fact, the largest of the industries. And yet, it's a little confusing to me when I saw it listed as things like AI, which I don't think of AI as its own industry. I think of AI as a workload that's leveraged by all the industries. So I was trying to understand what you're bucketing into this high tech area.
So let's yeah.
Sorry, I didn't get the AI part. I can explain the high tech. I don't think so.
Well, there was somewhere in the report where it listed a couple examples of high tech, and one of them was AI. So I'm not understanding the definition of that as an industry.
Yeah, sorry. I think that's strange. I think let me give definition of a high tech industry, that how we define it. So high tech is essentially the software players out there. Second, it also involves the telecom. This also covers the semiconductor companies, and there are two other sub-segments that are subsumed into high tech.
Well, but I mean, look, it should be obvious why that's problematic. We're talking about a technology that's built in silicon. If you lump all of the silicon manufacturers as high tech, then the entire industry sits in high tech, right? If it's all the software vendors and all the silicon vendors, then the whole thing is high tech. Who are you selling to, though, right? When you're talking about industries, it's who's consuming it, who's buying those servers, who's buying those services. Financial services, healthcare, government, manufacturing, those are all examples of industries. I don't see how high tech is an industry. High tech software and silicon are things that serve the other industries. They're not their own industry, I guess.
Well, but
at least for our purposes.
There can be some consumption by the tech companies as well.
Yeah, so Jesse,
So
think
we're
of it,
saying we're
the-
self-consuming? Is that the idea? This is,
There's a lot of high-tech companies that don't build confidential computing. I don't
right.
know if the numbers are right. I'm just saying philosophically, I think the high-tech definition, I think, but Abhishek just gave is much broader than companies that are involved in confidential computing.
But
Yeah,
does this
yeah, so
include
Jesse,
people running
to
their own
read it.
servers? Like Google and Facebook running their own data centers? Is that what's in high tech?
So, so all the ISPs are included as in a bucket, high tech bucket. So this will definitely be their companies who are consuming who is creating as well as consuming confidential computing to a certain extent. But then it also has a long tail of software vendors who are not building confidential computing today. Think of any SaaS vendor that is out there, or any other software vendor, enterprise software vendor that are out there. So that's one. Also within high tech, we also cover telecom as a vertical, right? So a lot of telecom companies
Well, what's
get covered under high tech.
what's confused, number one, bucketing all that stuff under high tech doesn't really inform us very much, because we're a group of hardware and software vendors, right? And services, right? That's what our consortium is. And so our desire is to understand who we sell to. Our desire is not to understand ourselves. When we got that questionnaire, it didn't, to my memory, it did not even include high tech as an industry. It included all of these other industries, and we supplied responses based on that. I don't understand how those were reinterpreted as high tech.
But let's make a distinction though, Abhishek, to Jesse's point though, is I'm assuming this is just companies that we're selling to, not companies buying them for their own use.
This is purely from a demand perspective. So,
Right.
so let's say SAP may be making some investments in terms of creating certain application for confidential computing. That is one thing. So, and that is more from a supply side, right? But from a demand perspective as well, SAP may be buying certain confidential computing services from the other ecosystem vendors that are out there. So, and then apart from the small set of companies who are developing confidential computing software, there are again a bunch of other software vendors. There is a long tail of the entire SaaS market that's out there. Those guys are not developing confidential computing. Those guys are consuming confidential computing, buying confidential computing from AWS, Azure, right? All of those gets combined under high tech. And in the RFIs as well, that we floated out, we had the same distribution of industries, and we have been very clear in terms of, okay, these are the companies who you are selling to. So I think we can define, and I think we will definitely have that slide in the final document in terms of defining the industries and geo clusters that we have, like what all is included and what all is not. Yeah, I think
So Abhishek, I'm seeing kind of a consistent theme here, which is that I know that all of you understand exactly how you got to this, but we're having problems with some of the definitions. And if we in this group are unclear, I don't know how we represent this to the bigger world, because we're not even clear what this is. So I think to start with, we need to have very clear definitions for what all of these industries mean, what the definition of this market means, because you can see kind of a pattern here that we don't understand what it is you're actually representing here. And therefore, that's why we're confused. So I think if we can, in general, go through this whole thing and make sure that we're, when in doubt, explain it out. and we can always move those slides to the end if we don't need them. But that seems to be kind of something that keeps coming up.
Yeah, I want to be clear. SAP is not consuming confidential computing. SAP is software and services, but they're selling to somebody, right? It's like I sell a bunch of servers to Microsoft and Google, et cetera, right? But so you could say, oh, Microsoft is the customer of all the Intel servers. Well, that would be um, myopic though, because Microsoft's only going to buy Intel servers if there's somebody buying Microsoft's services, right? So the real customer is the Bank of America or the Ford or the whoever that's buying from Microsoft, right?
Yeah.
So
So
I
Jesse,
think what we want to
just to,
understand is who's consuming confidential computing, not just who are the players in confidential computing.
Yeah, well, one exception is Microsoft does that, but then also they provide Office 365 and
Right.
Outlook Mail. So
Absolutely.
it gets very convoluted, and it does need to consider both use cases.
Mhm.
yeah, and Jesse, just to add, right, so I think SAP may not be the best of the example from a software vendor side, because they have their entire infrastructure, HANA infrastructure, right? So, but then if you talk about someone else, like let's say talk about Workday, right? Now, Workday underlying infrastructure, they are hosted on a cloud vendor, right? So they are consuming confidential computing from that cloud vendor, rather than building confidential computing from scratch. And think of any small software vendor, any field service management software, any CRM software that are there, which are hosted on the public cloud. Um, they are consumers of confidential computing, which is being provided by these hyperscalers. So it needs to be thought of from that lens. But I think, Linda, to your point, I think definitely this needs some illustration, or this needs some explanation around what is not included from an industry perspective as well as geo. And to your other questions around definitions and all, I think we have covered it from our last feedback that we received in terms of there are certain terminologies which are not very self-explanatory. So we have highlighted it in a specific slide talking about all the definitions. So I think that we have covered over there, but we'll illustrate on this as well.
So I have another issue. I don't know, Jesse, if you had other things first.
Go ahead.
You all-
I've got one more, but
Yeah,
I
and we
shouldn't
and we
monopolize.
do,
Go ahead.
so we do need to leave a few minutes for the fellowship discussion too, but go ahead, Linda.
Go ahead, Jesse.
No,
More.
I've monopolized.
Okay, well, this is going to be contentious, but we have to bring it up, and that goes back to AWS and Nitro enclaves. And I know we have the consortium looks at confidential computing through the narrow lens of TEE, trusted execution environments, but the market includes more than that. And I don't know where we are in that. Is if we are to limit what we think confidential computing is to what the consortium has originally defined it as, I think we may be missing the bigger scope of the market, because the market will define confidential computing, not the consortium. And I'm not sure where this report fits in that. So I don't know whether this, whether the AWS piece was included, whether it wasn't included. It seems very TEE centric to me reading through this.
So was AWS's market and service included?
No, that came up in our last review. I thought it got added, but
We have factored in AWS as well, but then in terms of the definition, that we are going ahead with, at least from this perspective, is how consortium defines confidential computing, and it is from the lens of TEs. But then, if we want to expand that definition, I think we can definitely do that.
Well, I guess my question is though, this was looking at the TAM, right? There's no vendor breakout in here, right?
Yeah.
So why do we think AWS's target audience for Nitro is not included in this TAM? What, I mean, it seems to me it
Because
would
of
be.
of a discussion we had a few weeks ago where it was, and I don't think you were there, Jesse, but there was a fairly heated discussion where it said that Nitro should not be in there. Nitro
No.
Yeah.
I understand that Nitro doesn't meet the current definition of confidential computing that the consortium has defined. And in
Correct.
fact, that may be revised at some point, right? But as it stands today, I get that. I'm saying this is a TAM report. It doesn't list vendors at all. It lists people who are looking to protect the privacy of data. How is this not AWS's TAM as well? Like, what is excluded from this is my point. I don't see
And
anything
that's why
excluded.
what Abhishek just said something about it was based on our definition, the consortium, and that's what I don't understand. And maybe that's all in here, but I
Because
can't
the only
tell
thing
from-
I saw excluded is I saw TPMs excluded.
Right.
Yes.
I saw homomorphic encryption excluded. And I
Correct.
saw secondary software services, right? So not the solutions themselves, but like the fees to develop or whatever. So from my reading of this, this would seem to include AWS's offerings just as much as anybody else's, because it's not an offering view, it's a demand view.
Abhishek, can you confirm that that's correct?
Yes, this is more from a demand perspective, right? And definitely in terms of how AWS defines confidential computing is different than our definition of confidential computing. And just to share a couple of excerpts from the discussion that we had with few AWS folks. In both of them, in terms of their addressable market for confidential computing, in the way they have defined it through Nitro's lens, from their perspective, confidential computing will be as big as cloud computing for them in next 5 to 6 years. So it will be almost 60-70% of their cloud software market share, which is way big to start off with. So definitely in terms of the way they define or they look at confidential computing is very different from how we have defined it and how some of the other players in the consortium define it. And for the sake of and I think from our perspective as well, the way consortium defines confidential computing is more in a true sense, we are talking about confidential computing. I think from the way Nitro is defined as an offering, in our point of view, there are few missing elements that are required from a confidential computing perspective. And Sushil, Arjun, if you want to add few points over there, feel free to.
So it sounds to me like what you're saying is, if you took a broader definition of confidential computing, maybe more similar to what Amazon's describing, then in theory, the percentages of adoption in the TAM would be higher than you show here.
Yeah.
That's what I was trying to get at. Thank you.
Okay, so this is the, I don't know, the conservative estimate based on the narrower definition of confidential computing. If one had a broader definition, it could potentially have greater demand. Is that correct?
And it's the best. I think for taking a conservative lens is the best approach over here, because to be very honest, the level of awareness that is that confidential computing has as of today is within fairly in a very nascent stage, right? Not everyone is even aware of it, and if we end up projecting a certain numbers, right, which is as big as running in 3-digit billion dollars, people might not understand how it is coming and where it is coming from. So think we should have that sort of a conservative lens over there.
The last one that I wanted to get in is in the use case deep dives, there is blockchain, there is, I think, key management, HSMs, something like that. There's a few different areas. What was surprising to me is that there was nothing about privacy in the public cloud, which I think of as the biggest usage. I saw multi-party, but even as big as multi-party or maybe bigger is moving from private to public and maintaining your privacy, right? Moving from private cloud on-prem into public, but maintaining privacy and control. And I didn't see that listed. So I guess I'm a little confused. That's the bread and butter here.
I agree.
Yeah. So Sheil, if you go to the use case on security. Yeah. So Jesse, to your point around public cloud security. So if you look at the use case scenarios in this, so the public cloud security, we cover it as a part of security. And to your point around, yes, it is one of the major market contributor to the
Okay, so
overall
you've blended it into this security one. I read the key management stuff, and I guess I didn't realize that this other area is what encompasses that. I see that as a pretty big item, right?
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't call it
So-
security, by the way. I call it privacy.
Privacy. Yeah.
Yeah, I think both privacy and security are very overarching terms. So what I think the team had a suggestion was if you can change modify the term security to maybe cloud security, right? And because largely what the key management system is also happening is in the cloud infrastructure. And then we have application security in public cloud. So the overarching term over here, if it is cloud security, it may be more intuitive because the question that you had, some of the other folks who are reading this will have.
So again, I think we have another question of where the definition is not clear to us. I had the same problem. Looking at multi-party computing and security specific use cases are the biggest growth driver. That wasn't clear to me that what Jesse's talking about is under security specific use cases. And I think key management is different than this whole privacy in the public cloud. So I think we have to be more specific so people understand. And again, it goes back to, I know that all of you understand exactly what you put in here, but it's not always coming across to us what you mean by some of these terms.
So that may be a good follow-up here is if we can just, is there a way for Abhishek to share all of the background definitions for us? I mean, to the comments here, I think we're going to need those as an appendix for the document anyway, because we're going to need to have those be visible for explanations. But even as part of the review process, it seems like we're going to have those definitions to make sure we can give better comments on the review.
Sure,
Yeah, I
so
think because I think my overall concern is, what is the purpose of publishing this? The purpose of publishing this is two things. It's to let end consumers know that this is real, and it's to let other partners know that it's worth investing in, right? Whether that be OEMs or that be other services and solution vendors, especially SIs, I would think integrators, right? You're wanting people to recognize the opportunity so that they'll get involved, right? And if we've got this structured in a way where people look through it and everything they see in there, they say, well, that's not me. I don't do key management.
Right.
So then I think, well, then I don't need to worry about this number. But what I do is a lot of advising people on moving from, siloed on-prem systems and into the public cloud. That should come out nice and strong because there's a lot of people involved in that, right? I think that's the reason these categories matter is am I searching for a high-tech customer, or am I searching for instance, public sector or HLS and financial services, et cetera?
Yeah, that's good. So
agree.
obviously, so a couple of things. So is it possible to share those do you have a way you can share those definitions with us or add them to the draft so we can look at them?
Yeah, I think I'll do that, maybe, by tomorrow or day after.
Okay, so
I'll
it's at least
add those
okay.
appendix.
And I know you guys were trying to get us a final by like next week. I think we're gonna need a little more time. I think given this conversation, I think we need to keep the feedback window open a little longer. So I propose let's plan to leave the feedback window open until next Friday for everybody.
Sure.
And so
Yeah,
we get the
we can do that.
definitions, and if we need to have a follow-up conversation, then we for everybody here, if we need to, after you see the definitions and review the results in light of those definitions, if further discussions discovered if we're hard, we can set up some additional time next week for that. Does that
Sure.
make sense?
Yeah.
That's good. Okay, good. Okay, so yeah, so let's get the definitions out, and then we'll update the report, and then keep the feedback coming, everybody. So
Great, thank you.
this has been good.
Thank
Been
you,
very good.
guys.
And good progress. I know this is a lot of kind of very vague things we're trying to put structure around. So I appreciate you guys jumping in there. On that. So
Thank you.
cool. Nick, are you still with us?
Yes, I'm here.
Wonderful. Okay. Can we take 10 minutes and talk about your fellowship program idea? Will that be sufficient?
Yes, thank you. So you can
Yes.
hear in the background, that's my son crying. So my apologies.
It sounds
for that.
like you already started your fellowship
Oh
program.
yeah, exactly. So thank you, Ashley and David, for having me. I just joined Anarchs as the community manager. I'm really happy to be part of this. And my goal here is not just to grow the Anarchs community, but to grow the CCC community together. And that's why I want to propose this fellowship program. So while talking with Mike, we were reviewing some opportunities, and we saw that there's a program called Outreach from the Software Freedom Conservancy. And this is a very important program, an internship program whose goal is to promote diversity and to create opportunities for everyone around the world. So just to give a brief description of the project, 92% of the interns that are part of this program are women, and 64% of the people of this program are people of color. And so this outreach program, the goal is to promote open source projects from all kinds of areas and bring people internships and promote this. And Anarchs would like to be part of that. And my feeling is that not just Anarchs, perhaps we as CCC, we could be part of this, and we could have received some interns for each project. I was able to talk with Steven about this. He said that there is budgets if we want to be part of this. It will be $6,000 per intern that we can receive and work with them for 3 months. So if we have 6 projects right now at the CCC, that will not be much, and I think we could get a lot of value from that. And so that's one of the proposals, and I would like to have a decision from the members here, from the outreach committee, if this is something noble, is this something that we could pursue, and if this is going to bring value to CCC and to all the projects that are part of it. And another proposal, in October, the Anarchs project will be participating in Hacktoberfest. This is a very popular hackathon promoted by DigitalOcean and several other partners. And this helps open source projects to have contributors. And this is different from the internship. It doesn't cost anything to join. And people from all around the world participate in that. And Anarchs want to be part of that. And again, we want to invite the CCC to be part of that as well. And we together to have a common outreach program around this. And that's why I suggested this type of fellowship program that we can participate together. And I'm open to any feedback. So I just joined and I'm already putting out some proposals.
That's good.
I don't want to sound like I'm
That's good,
trying
that's good.
to, yeah, but I want to really hear feedback and see if people would be interested in that. And that's it. Those are the two proposals for now.
So on the first, so Nick, thanks for bringing it forward. First of all, I think you join and propose is perfect.
Yeah.
On the first one, so sorry. So it sounds like it's a kind of per person. We for I think you said it was $6,000 gets us an
Yes,
intern for 3
exactly.
months on a project, right?
Mhm.
Okay. And that person can work on any project that we have happening that we think we'd benefit from a smart, motivated person who wants to learn.
Exactly.
Okay.
So ideally, one intern per project, I would recommend. So
Right.
at Anarchs, we could have one, receive one, and our idea is to have them develop a few demos using Anarchs.
Right. So at the risk of sounding bureaucratic,
Mhm.
I think that probably needs to go to the projects. I think really each project team, I mean, I don't know what others think. My view, it sounds like a fantastic program, first of all, but I think it's difficult for us at an outreach level to tell the project teams, here's your intern, right? I think the project teams really need to think about an intern in the context of what the work that needs to get done on the project.
Mhm.
And I don't know that we have that kind of, we don't have that kind of visibility in this group on the individual projects. But
Well,
that's just my take
and
on it.
how do we decide which projects to fund an intern for, right? We've got a lot of projects.
Yeah, there are 6 open source projects, if I'm
Right.
aware. And so perhaps I'm suggesting one intern per project. And
So $36,000.
yeah.
So I think it may be, again, sounding bureaucratic, but I think it would be a good discussion to have at the technical advisory grade, the TAC, because that's where all the project teams are.
Perfect.
And to say this is a great way of kind of getting more visibility. Now, most of the people here, many of the people here do not go to that meeting, right? So it's kind of a different group.
Yeah.
Ben, you're doing the TAC meeting still?
Me, I'm going to, yeah, most of the time.
You go to both most of the time. Okay. Sorry. So Ben, we maybe you can help Nick as kind of an ambassador just to kind of get him connected in there.
Sure. No, I'm happy to do that. So are we just, I don't know how to say it. Are we asking that the TAC takes it under advisement to approve 6 projects or six of these slots?
I think that would be presumptuous on our part.
I lost you.
Yeah, I would say, I think the first question is this going to be valuable for the TAC, right? Do these projects want an intern? Can they use an intern? Can all of them use an intern? Is there enough, in other words, is there demand for this?
Right.
I think outreach plays a role because it's helping to make our projects and our work visible, but that needs to be hand in hand with the fact that there's actually something for them to do.
Yeah. So from the Anarchs perspective, we want to have an intern as part of this program, the outreaching, and for us, it will be very valuable because we want to bring this intern and have them build a demo of how to use Anarchs. It has to be something very simple.
Oh, so there's a specific, so got it. So there's a specific, request to fund an intern for the Anarchs project.
Yeah, we want to have this intern, and I think it will be valuable for us to create this demo and also for the intern. And we will also promote diversity within our project. And I think that will be valuable for us. And the reason why we would like to propose this for other projects as well, because I believe it will also bring value to each project, hopefully, if you see this as valuable.
Got it. Okay. So then I think it's 2. So I think that I would split the 2 pieces of it though, Nick. I think there's to the TAC discussion, there's the general conversation about, hey, project teams, there's interns available and here's a way to do it. You know, and to Jesse's point, the project teams have to have a need for a person or something for them to do. Otherwise it doesn't work. Otherwise it doesn't benefit anybody, right? Separately, there's a specific request for NARCs looking for $6K in funding from the consortium for an intern to help with the outreach efforts, preparing demonstrations, other kind of outreach materials. Is that right?
Yes, that's right.
Okay. Okay. I have no idea how we go about approving that. So let me take that as a follow-up. I just don't know what the process is on that. I mean, conceptually, I think it makes sense, but I have no idea how that works. So let me take that as a follow-up on what that looks like. Then you also mentioned the Oktoberfest event.
Oktoberfest, yes.
Yeah. Is that something you can share with the group? I think it would be great for people just to kind of any information you got about it. If there's a link to a site or any information that shows it.
Yes, so actually recommended that I followed up by email, sending more information about these projects. But the Oktoberfest will happen throughout the whole month of October, and people can, any of the open source projects that are part of the consortium or any other on GitHub, they can signalize that they want to be part of the Oktoberfest. And developers from around the world, they can be part of that. And when they participate in those projects, they get some gifts, they get some, so it's a nice fun way for people to understand open source as well. So
yeah, that's good. All right, that's good. That's good. Yeah, why don't you share that then? That would be great. I know we lost a few people here because some people had to drop right at the top of the hour. But I would say go have a conversation with the TAC about the internship more broadly. Let Ashley and I follow up on what the process would be for funding it here, and then go ahead and share the information on Oktoberfest, and then we'll go from there.
Thank you. Yeah, that would be great. Thank you so much.
All right. Well, glad you joined us. Welcome, and thanks everybody else who's still here. And we'll call the meeting wrapped at 9:02 and go from there.
Great. Thanks.
Have a good rest of the week.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.